Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. We are just thrilled to have Will Ryan and Iain Murray with us to share their recent experiences at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics that were held in July 2021. If you have questions as we go along, please add them to the Q&A section down the bottom and we'll endeavour to get them answered. Will has been a member of the squadron since November 2016. He is a multiple Australian Sailing Award winner, Australian Institute of Sport Awards winner, multiple 470 world champion, European champion, and of course an Olympic silver medalist in Rio and a gold medalist from Tokyo 2020. Iain Murray, a member since June 1988, one of our senior B members, has sailed multiple boats. He's also a multiple world champion across different classes. But Iain was also the Australian Sailing's high performance director for the 2020 Olympic Games and the team manager up in Tokyo. Iain's also been involved with the America's Cup as a sailor and as a designer, and more recently as a race director for the 36th America's Cup. Now, I think we're going to start with, first of all, where is everybody? So I'm going to flick over to Will, and maybe if you can let us know where you are.
Thanks for the intro, Karen. And nice to get to join you. I am actually in Switzerland at the moment, and tomorrow I'm heading across to Italy. We did a quarantine in May, so I just thought I'd put it off a little bit before having to sit in a hotel on my own again.
I totally understand. Totally understand. And Iain, where are you joining us from?
I am in quarantine in Sydney. I'm in Pitt Street in Sydney. So I got back to Sydney a couple of days ago. I had a trip to Europe, met up with my daughters in London and Will in Denmark. And, I was involved with the SailGP event in Denmark last weekend. So I'm back here now doing my penance.
Okay, we might be able to send you a care package in there when you get sick of the
That'd
food
be
at the
good.
Meriden. And Christian, where are you coming from? Christian Brook, our Vice Commodore.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I'm based at home. Been at work today and just been at the squadron to pick up my food for the weekend. So thank you very much. Really proud of the boys, and it's great to have them here tonight. And looking forward to hearing all about Will and Iain's time at the Tokyo 2021 Olympics, as you say. So how about we start off, if that's okay, Karen? And I'd just like to get from Will, how does it feel, mate? Olympic gold medalist, fill us in.
Thanks, Christian. To be honest, it's pretty surreal. I think it's definitely taken a little while to sink in. When we're in Japan, it kind of started not really feeling like an Olympics. It just felt like another regatta. So we're a little bit separated in our venue and all the rest of it. But for me, the Olympics really began when I saw my sister start her competition, and I think I was fangirl number one that day, and I kind of kept the excitement since then. And it's really nice just to finally be back with some friends and family and to get to show them and thank them for being part of the journey. But definitely looking forward to getting back to Australia and getting to share it with all those people as well.
Good on you, excellent. And we'll get into what you're currently doing over in Europe at the moment, a bit more about Tokyo. But take us back to little Will Ryan sailing. Where did that start? How'd you get into the sport, and where's that all fit into the picture, the long picture?
I think I was pretty fortunate to probably credit my grandfather for getting me into the sport. My father, Frank, always had ambitions of me being a rugby union player. You obviously know what I look like, Christian. I'm about your height, but I don't quite have your build. So I was never going to be a great rugby union player. But I did play for a few years. But when I was about 12 or 13, I finally got introduced to racing in sailing. And yeah, it's kind of grown from there. I have great fun memories of sailing with my grandfather and family growing up. And I think that's the enjoyment factor is kind of what's always appealed to me through the sport. And the competitive side, I've really found my calling in sailing. It's always just a changeable game, and you can never reach that level of perfection that you're always chasing. So yeah, you always want more, and I think that's why all the people on this call are part of the sport. But I think that's why even those people that just get that little taste of it really feel a sense of what we like about it.
Yeah, it's the outdoors, and the wind in the hair. So what classes did you start off with early before the 470, and how did you get into the 470, being a smaller class in Australia?
So my first competitive racing was as a crew on a flying ant, and that was with Mark Langford, a local from up on Lake Macquarie, and he kind of taught me actually everything in sailing from a young age. I had absolutely no idea. I remember being quite scared. So, but over time, he kind of taught me what was important in the sport, and yeah, it's amazing. I kind of credit him because we had some great coaching at that stage because he'd had previous results, and kind of grew from there. And I started to sail a Stabbo as a helmsman myself, and then began to steer a flying ant and transitioned basically through any sailing class that I could get my hands on. And I did the City of Hobart, did the 29er Worlds, 18-foot skiffs, yeah, a couple of the East Coast races, and it kind of grew from there until 2009. A chance meeting with Victor Kovalenko, who's been our coach since then in the 470, and he kind of steered me down that Olympic pathway. It wasn't something that had really appealed to me before that. I'd always been match racing and yachts and that kind of side of the sport. So yeah, since then, that's kind of been my calling. But I don't think I've ever lost sight of always wanting to do any other kind of racing I can. And I've had the great opportunity to do some TP52 sailing in Europe, some of the World Match Racing Tour, some Etchell sailing with some fellow club members from the squadron. And I think that's kind of why I've really found my calling in this last 4 or 5 years, just to have that extra opportunities to do some different classes, meet different people, and try and combine the skills to get that end result of improving a little bit.
Excellent. It's all about the 1%ers, and you've obviously ticked a few of those just recently. Iain, get back to you here a bit with, got to get you with quarantine there. The last 12 to 18 months, we couldn't be doing anything in Australia because of COVID, and the Olympics were called off. Games were postponed, sorry. Talk to us a bit about the difficulty in managing the team and the group and having to change the logistics with I understand there were some problems with accommodation, for instance. So maybe you can enlighten us with some other issues that you came across over that 12 months break.
Well, look, the Olympics is a 4-year cycle. They call it a quad in Australian sport. And, and these athletes, they pour their lives into it. They are very focused. They have very tailored and programs around their sailing, their racing, their physical fitness, their weight, every facet of what makes up, them as athletes. And so, when you're in the final rundown in March, April, for an event in July, to say, oh, listen, we're going to move it back a year, it's just the brakes go on, and everyone looks at each other and says, well, what are we going to do? We were tapering, we were doing this, we've prepared this, our boat's here, we can't travel, what happens next? And so, to take a team which has been largely, pretty much in a case of Australian sailing, everyone was selected, even though the Finn and the 470 women technically weren't selected because they hadn't completed the events. But to grab the group and use that opportunity to great effect, was a really challenging thing. And there's money involved, there's logistics involved, but most importantly, it's taking the team which has been named, pushing them, getting them into a much tighter team, and start the process of the team bonding, communicating, helping each other out, because they had to, because they were, we were isolated in Australia, and while the rest of Europe, America, England, didn't have the restrictions that we had, are all training in Porto, Palma, Sardinia, wherever. We're stuck at home, lockdown, trying to figure out, how do we actually go sailing? And, we all saw it down at the yacht club, can we go there? And so after a lot of sort of planning around protocol, bubbles, understanding what we're actually dealing with, getting out on the water in places like Coffs Harbour, Tweed River, Gold Coast, and filling in all of those gaps, you know, with a lot of time that we would normally not have, to use that effectively in understanding things like weather, personal fitness, well-being, technicalities of the boats, getting a greater opportunity to look at, you know, where everyone's weak points were in their playbook, and have the time to work on it.
And those places you mentioned, Ed, were they specifically places, Coffs and the Queensland, where you were trying to get conditions like Japan and the weather like, you know, weather and wind conditions? Was it, or just was it more team bonding and getting away from Sydney, out of the, create your own bubble?
There's a bit of everything, you know. Like there was a period where we couldn't sail in Sydney, so you know we had to escape to regional Australia. There was conditions that we were chasing, you know, offshore, and I've got to say, off Tweed Heads and Coffs Harbour were, and the Gold Coast, you know, were better than Sydney Harbour, you know, with the cliffs and the bluffs and everything. So towards the end of the campaign, you know, going as far north as Yeppoon and Magnetic Island, chasing the heat build up and everything going in is all part of it. But look, generally it's, you know, getting away, getting focused, working in small groups, in bubbles, ticking off, you know, the goals that had been set to deal with your particular boat, your crew. And in the case of Matt and Will, you know, look, it was really specialised stuff. You know, we're polishing a diamond here, and so the deep dive into the detail of what they were doing and what their boat is, and really fine tuning it was, you know.
So the 470's been around. The 470 class has been around for many years. Were there some improvements you were able to get over that period of time during that 12 months to actually zoom in, not zoom in, but, you know, shouldn't use Zoom in that regard because we use Zoom different ways now, but with particular areas on the 470 you're able to look at?
Yeah, look, Matt and Will had a really successful 2019, won all 5 regattas that they participated in, including the World Championships. And to come away from that and say, you know, there's areas of improvement is, you know, they're really small things. But yes, there were. There was, you know, in that period of time, we built 2 new boats, a bunch of new masts were evaluated, a lot of work on sail design, a lot of fine tuning, a lot of detail around the boat. You know, just making a better widget. But most importantly, I think, you know, what I saw is these guys learning themselves a little bit better as a team and developing themselves and the communication and the techniques used in board the boat. There was you know, in 2019, the downwind techniques used by Europeans was developing fast. And so there was a really big learning curve on how to rock and roll the boat downwind and to change over from traditionally how they sail the boat downwind to maybe a couple of other different styles. And so all of that was, you know, an immense amount of work, you know, like synchronized swimming to add into the program.
Yeah, they mentioned that a bit in the coverage about the different techniques, and certainly we'll get on to the techniques of upwind sailing. Maybe the 470 will, you know, a little bit, but we'll bit more about the preparation. Your last 12 months leading into the Japan trip, the final trip to Japan for the Olympics. What did you think different this year with the COVID lockdown for you, preparation wise?
I feel like our approach for the whole Tokyo campaign was a little bit different to the Rio one. Rio, obviously, I was new to Matt and Victor. It's a team, and we're operating as the 3 of us. I think when we kind of finished the Rio campaign, a lot of the reasoning behind why Matt and I wanted to continue and really lucky to have Victor and all of his support was just that we wanted to take a little bit more ownership of it and kind of try to put in what we thought we had learned over the years. So we kind of had a bit of an open book, and we planned that 4-year campaign. And as Iain touched on, it was pretty challenging when we got that extra year extension, because in September of 2019, we were kind of exactly where we'd hoped that we would be. And the Olympics kind of couldn't come soon enough. We felt we were really close to being at our best and getting into that final big event. So the extra year was a little bit of a shock in that regards. Like, we were 1 day out from our World Championships in Parma over in Europe when the whole COVID thing kind of struck. So Iain had just arrived. Victor and Matt and I had been there setting up the boat, and we had a great day of training and kind of came in, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, you all have to go back to Australia, and yeah, we'll see what's coming next. So that extra year certainly challenged us, particularly when we couldn't train together, being all from different regions. But it was actually a really valuable year because we learned probably a lot more about ourselves. And I definitely felt I learned a lot more about myself in that final year than I did through the rest. And we were really fortunate having Iain as a big part of that, because he helped us to focus on ourselves, which had always been our goal, was to kind of monitor the opponents, but ultimately it was only ourselves that we could improve. So it kind of gave us the tools and the confidence to help change a few systems in the boat and focus on those. And at the same time, be quite structured in how we wanted to do that training. We pinpointed a few weaknesses or potential weakness areas of how we could be the most all well-rounded sailors that we could be. As Iain touched on, there's a couple of teams were good in the downwind, but then other areas they weren't as strong. So we knew that if we could kind of tick through them one by one, we'd hopefully put our best foot forward coming into the final Olympic Games. And yeah, I think that's probably why it's so satisfying that last race of the Olympics, which was amazing that it got to be broadcasted, so we could finally showcase to other people exactly what we did, even if it does look a little bit silly. But we could put it all together and finish showing what we've been working on so hard for all this time. So yeah, I think it was a really cool outcome.
You're right there, Will. The couple of windy days you actually had before that medal race, I had people contacting me going, is that how you sail the 470? You could tell that you needed to be quite physical, and, the boats looked great. So, and, the coverage back here was great to be able to watch race by race and watch you on a tracker and things like that. So did you work
the way you sailed it, Karen?
We used to pump downwind and we worked pretty hard, but no, that upwind thing, I don't think I'll ever remember. I'd be flipping off my wire if that was the case. So when you're working back in Australia, did you have training partners back here?
That's been one of the big challenging parts actually of this last campaign, is that once, the Australia community kind of chose to go more in the direction of the offshore yachting and the kite foiling stuff, we've lost our opportunity to continue in the men's 470. So this was the end of the event for us. So it's hard to encourage others to come spend the time to be the punching bag for Matt and I in that regards. But we were really fortunate. We had some great young sailors, Amelia and Chris from both Perth and Tasmania. And we had the girls team from Perth who spent a lot of time over on the East Coast with Matt and I. So that was a hugely fortunate opportunity for us. We've had some Japanese training partners at various stages of the last 4 years. And in the final little lead up, we could sail against the New Zealanders. So overall, it probably wouldn't have been the ideal training partner that we could have, because I think we all know that in sailing, the best way to compare yourself is against a direct reference. But having that variety, and Matt and I are both quite competitive people, so we are always pushing each other pretty hard anyway. So I think it was a good combination.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to know a little bit more about the relationships, because I know the campaigning's hard. You spend a lot of time on the road with each other and with your coach. How did you manage that?
Yeah, for me, my journey started back in 2009, and I first paired up with the guy Sam Kibble, and for he and I, that's kind of where my best memories of the Olympic campaign actually come from, because we had an absolute ball. We were doing it with not a lot of money. I think we had $2,500 for an entire European a year on the circuit for us, which most of that went in air tickets. So we spent plenty of nights sleeping in cars and putting pieces of bread in our meals to pretend that it was meat. And we slept in a person's cubby house in Germany 1 year, and it was absolutely freezing. So like all those memories kind of come from that side of it. And Sam and I learned a lot about sailing, but probably what we learned was that it was hard to be super competitive when we were such good friends. We started as friends, and to move it to that relationship where you can challenge each other is really hard. So I think for Matt and I, what we did really well from the beginning was that we approached it a little bit more as a professional relationship, not quite a business partnership, but we could be really open and clear with each other with how we wanted to improve as a team. But that had a really strong underlying friendship underneath it, and that's kind of carried us through. And the last couple of months, I think we were probably like closer friends than ever, which was obviously great timing from that side of things, but it probably showed that we were really content with what we'd managed to put together in that final year. So I think Victor plays a big part in that. Like, he obviously chooses a lot of people, not only on their physical side, but also their personalities. And he's the one that kind of guides them into trying to get the best out of themselves to be the best sailors or best 470 athletes or the best individuals. He's a great motivational speaker for anyone in any space. So I think he's probably the mastermind behind why it all kind of pieces together. But yeah, we were lucky probably having Iain at the end as a fourth person, because the bigger that group was, without getting too big, but we could make better constructive decisions. We could all stay on the same page together and keep challenging each other to moving forwards, but in a really progressive way, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, Victor, we all know him as the medal maker. I was lucky enough to be involved with the squad when he first came to Australia in '98, in lead up to the 2000 games, but that's just showing my age. But Victor, he's produced so many world-class sailors. Have you got one thing that you have learned from the medal maker?
Is this a question for Iain or for me?
No, it's for you. It's for you. I know there's many things you can learn. I'm just wondering if you've been able. It's actually a question that's come through from Fergus, and so I'm passing it on.
Well, I think Victor's most favourite saying to me was that I have to be in advance, and that was in a lot of the movements in the boat. But probably the underlying thing that Victor taught me, and I guess to Matt as well, is to trust yourself. Like, when I first met Victor, he said, if you work really hard, one day you could be a world champion. And then I kind of did that for a little while. And 2 or 3 years later, he's like, oh, if you work really hard, you could be an Olympic champion. And I'm not sure if he placed it on purpose, but I definitely remember him saying that. And then I guess that was the underlying secret, is that everything that's good in life is probably hard to chase. But if you work really hard at it, you've got to trust your own abilities and get there. And I think that was, for me as a person, that's probably one of the biggest differences between Rio and Tokyo. The results on the paper probably look better coming into the Rio Olympiad than they did in the Tokyo one, but that extra bit of time and to grow a little bit as a person, I probably felt much more relaxed coming to the Tokyo one than I did going into Rio.
Interesting. And Iain, I know there was a huge support team behind Matt and Will and Victor, but we still don't know who was over there. I know you have a weather guy. I know you have a boat builder over there. How big was your team that was supporting our Olympic sailors?
I was there as the manager. Carolyn Brisbane is the performance manager within Australian Sailing, and she is very much the person that sits across all of the detail, logistics, coaching, responsibilities, everything, and an incredibly hard worker. Then under her is we had sports science, sports medical support, which was 2 physios, and Benita Layla, who heads up that department, and she was everything from catering and nutrition and overall well-being. We had Mark Thorpe, the boat builder. We had 2 weather girls, not men, Karen.
Sorry.
We had Karina Tabar.
Ladies, please, Iain.
Ladies. Karina Tabar from Western Australia and Libby from England, who was based in England. Then we had Sam Ellis as a general support, technical support. And we had Richard Slater with rules. And then we had the media liaison officer and the team psychiatrist, Andrea First. So that's the sort of level of support to 13 athletes.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. And then your role.
Oh, and 2 chefs.
Oh, really? So you were living really in your own bubble. They were cooking for you as well?
That's right. Yeah. So, we were bubbleized from the moment that we arrived in Japan. So, we were isolated into hotels, isolated transport to take you from the hotel. And we were based in 2 hotels to Enoshima Island, which is, was a little Alcatraz for a month. So, we did not venture in any way out into the Japanese public at all.
But so was there any interaction with other sailing teams?
Only within the Olympic. So there's the Olympic Village accommodation where some of our athletes stayed. And then there's the Olympic venue, where everyone was free to mix together inside the bubble. Mm-hmm. But, we very much tried to keep to ourselves. And I think that was pretty consistent across all of the teams.
Mm-hmm. So, Will, that must have been a big difference from Rio, because I mean, I can remember in China going into this great big hall and, you had a range of food to choose from, and, it was a smorgasbord for every meal. Maybe, you saw the same thing for the 2 weeks, but how was all that?
I think we were really lucky. We had a fantastic support team with us, as Iain touched on. Perhaps the extra year helped us to refine that a little bit and make it even better. But I think we would have been in a good spot either way. It's a shame we couldn't use the facilities that the team had lined up for us to use in 2020 initially, because we had some great accommodation, and I think we were all really comfortable. We'd had enough time to travel there to know our local Japanese food shops and our way around the city. So to go back now is a bit sad in a way, to not get to see all those people and to get back into our regular run tracks and things like that. But we were hugely fortunate. We had Iain used to drive us around every day in our little team van, Miss Daisy, and then we had 2 fantastic chefs who made my life a little bit difficult because I was supposed to be on a diet. But at the end of the event, I certainly enjoyed it. So unfortunately, it's not like the true Olympic experience in that regard, but I think after all the time that we put into it, like we're there for the performance and for the results. So, and we couldn't have asked more in terms of the performance bubble we had. So, we're really lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And you certainly got the results. So, and you didn't get a chance to go to the opening ceremony then, and you're just out in the bubble on your own, as you say, on the island. The island was 100 k's away from Tokyo City, as such, was it?
It's about 60 kilometers south from the airport, or 35 south of Yokohama, in a big bay. And the island's a bit like Shutter Island, if you've ever seen that movie. It's kind of isolated off a little peninsula, and it's quite cool. It's actually the same venue that they used in the 1964 Tokyo Games. So a lot of history there, and Australia won its first gold medal there back in the day. So
64,
nice to be back, and
he's a squadron member, I might add.
A really cool venue.
Sorry, Karen, another squadron member.
Oh, yes.
So William Norton.
Billy Norton, yeah.
So, Will, a bit of the daily routine then? You get up and the breakfast is all supplied, and then weather briefings, and go ahead.
Yeah, so as Iain touched on, we were bubbleized from when we arrived. So we saw a lot of our hotel room, and we saw a lot of the yacht club, and they were really kind of it. So to leave our room, we had to take some separate stairs. We couldn't even go in the main foyer to go to the breakfast area and stuff like that. So we were really kind of, kept to the side, but we could gather together in a breakfast hall. We had to wear plastic gloves, and we had a screen, block perspex screens between each of us in our booth. So we could kind of wave to each other through the glass, but that was about it. Then as he touched on, we would have the morning weather briefings, and then we kind of gathered together. So most of the communication between our team was actually done online or through WhatsApp and Zoom and things like that, because you couldn't even really meet in a common debrief room or anything like that in Japan. They made it pretty challenging. So we were lucky enough that Iain would drive us down in our little Prius van, each day to the yacht club, and that could vary between a 15-minute and 45-minute trip depending on the traffic. We get down there and do the full security search. We get to go through the x-ray machine and scan in, and they do a full strip search of the car. You'd have to pop the bonnet and the fuel cap and everything else, I think it was. So and then once we're into the venue, it kind of came back to being a bit more normal. And that was, I guess, for us, always the relief to get back to the sailing club. Like, that's where we feel comfortable. And we had 2 workshop containers set up with little lockers, a bit of food, air conditioning, which is hugely important because it was kind of 32 to 34 degrees every day, but very, very humid. So as soon as you went outside, you could just feel your clothes just sticking to you. So it was pretty brutal. We had some slushy machines there to keep us hydrated. And then we had great support team with Sam, and Richard Sater was there with us, and Caroline and Mark Thorpe was kept endlessly busy looking after all of us with all of our last minute boat requests. But just to be there with the other team members as well, I think that was probably part of the success of our team, is that in the end, like, I was related to one of the other sailing members, but we did feel like a bigger family in many respects. So it was really cool. We could all support each other, and I think it was really nice that we were all there for each other at the beginning of the first race, which is Matt Wern and Mara on the first day, and they all hung around until the last race of the event, which was Matt Belcher and I.
Yeah, certainly looked like you had a great team bond there. Certainly Jake Lilly popped up a couple of times in various moments, and he excelled. But the differences that you had between Rio and Tokyo, the weather and aside from the COVID restrictions per se, but the differences between Rio and Tokyo?
The first day in Rio, we had a wind direction that none of us had ever seen before in any of our trips. We always used to kind of laugh and just say, oh, like, what are the chances? But to be honest, it kind of almost seems similar in Tokyo. We had a lot of really light airs in the lead up to the event, which was good because that's the area of focus that Matt and I kind of set aside that we really wanted to improve upon. So finally we could test ourselves against some other people in the fleet and see what those conditions were like in Japan. But I think as a broader group, it made it quite challenging because you want to see the full range of conditions leading into it, whether you've chosen the right equipment or you're happy with your sails, and what the wave states might be like. Because in 2019, we had monstrous sea breezes with 3 meter kind of swells and 20 to 25 knots every day. So I guess that was always playing in the back of our mind that could be on the cards. And that whole lead up period instead was kind of sailed between 3 and maybe 8 knots. So I probably trapezed twice in the 8 days leading up to the Olympics. So it wasn't a whole lot of action going on. So coming into the first day of the Olympics for most of us, the laser guys had a weird breeze off the land, and we were watching from the trackers, just being like almost scared for them because it looked so tricky. And then by the time that we got into our regatta, there was the threat of a typhoon kind of being pretty imminent. So I think the weather forecasters had their hands full in Tokyo as well.
And like Matt Wern, talk us a bit through about the regatta. You had a lot of great results to got into the medal race where you're nicely ahead in the points. So the medal race, we don't go quite to the medal race yet because we want to build up to that a little bit more. But generally over the preceding races, very quick and in the right direction. What was the secrets there?
Yeah, I'm sure Nev Whitty's listening to this call, but something that Matt and I would always say would be first to be fast, which is something that I stole from him. And I don't know if it was Iain or someone else, but they said start ahead and stay in front. And I think they're always 2 pretty good bits of advice for our sailing. So I think that's a pretty good summary of where Matt and I wanted to kind of keep our efforts. It was to not be afraid to kind of push to sail at our potential, but also being mindful that we didn't want to have any letters in our scorecard. So the first day, we had quite a tricky race course straight out the front of the club. We had helicopters overhead, which we hadn't really experienced for quite some time. And I think just the being right there and knowing that you're under the pump, like that was kind of cool for us. I think Matt and I were ready to take on the challenge. And that first race on the start line, I can remember looking along the line and everyone kind of felt like they were sitting a fair way back. And I'm always usually a little bit nervous on the start line, but I was like, no, we're like, I think we're okay here, Matt. Like, we've got to go. So we did. We had a great start, and I think from that point we kind of tried to carry that forward through the wind conditions. Matt's a fantastic 470 helmsman, you can kind of change the gears in the boat and keep us going really fast all the time. And that's probably what kind of set us apart on that first day. It was quite changeable. When you got in underneath the helicopter, it was really light and tricky. And then the bottom of the race course, there was a lot of waves from media boats and bounce back off the wall, similar to what we get in Sydney, actually. So I think the two of us could do a good job to keep the boat moving. We kept it simple, which is always the secret, and kind of came out of the day knowing we'd had the potential to have slightly better results, but also the satisfaction that we'd had two good ones. And it was a better start than what Matt and Malcolm had in London, and it was a better start than what Matt and I had in Rio. So yeah, I think that was a really good spot for us to be boat of the day. And we kind of probably between ourselves had set that goal that if we could be the boat of the day on each day, then that was probably going to help.
You'd probably say if you're going to be boat of the day each day, you're going to be certainly. And then Iain, you touched on previously before with the manager side of the role. What was your daily routine, and did you get out on the race course each day? And what challenges did you find from at Tokyo as opposed to Rio?
Yeah, look, I was very much part of Matt and Will's program on a daily thing. You know, obviously, you know, there were other responsibilities, but the team was very organised and very well planned going in there. So, you know, the program rolling out was very much run by Caroline, and it allowed me to be involved with Matt and Will, Victor. As Will was saying, you know, it started with Miss Daisy chauffeuring them around to being on the boat with them, you know, and adding, you know, we've tried very hard with these guys over the last year to, as Will said, to improve a number of areas of their sailing, and a lot of that was to do with starting, being consistent off the start and controlling where they wanted to go, and developing their strategy, which is developed around the meteorology and the currents and everything else. So a large amount of the day is in preparation for that, to, you know, give them the best possible advice in terms of, you know, what the weather is, how it's going, is the current consistent around the race course, and let them develop the strategy around the bias of the starting line, getting themselves comfortable to start on the line, you know, and that's all. You can see that on the tracking that they, you know, over the last year, they've gone from halving or quartering their distance average from the start, and you know, and then having that good speed to dictate when they want to tack, and so basically, you know, locking in that first half of the first beat, getting to the first mark in good shape, you know, that's what was important for these guys. So, you know, my focus was largely supporting them around with the environmental stuff.
Okay, so but early in the regatta that you weren't so much concentrating on the lasers when they were out there, or you concentrated?
Look, no. So Michael Blackburn, you know, look, he's the legend that he is in the laser class. You know, he's one man, does everything in that class, and you know, look, they were well under control with what they were doing, and you know, they didn't need me in the middle of their campaign, so they're pretty much under control. So, you know, the focus in Japan was the 470 men, and so my application to the other classes was limited. But, you know, obviously there to chat with the athletes before and after the races. You know, spent a bit of time with them talking about, you know, how they were going and where they were going and what was going right and what was going wrong.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions coming in that I'm going to throw in here as well from Nicholas Hogg.
Karen, sorry, Karen, I'll throw in one little bit, just extra bit of information there for Iain, because the strategy role, which Iain was kind of in charge of for our team, when we got to Japan, they put a blanket rule in that said no wind gear, none of the tide stick work, and none of the tech tools that we developed as a team were we allowed to use for the event. So that's where having someone like Iain with valuable eyes to kind of help us understand the race course really was a huge asset to us in many respects. Victor was a big part of our speed work always on the day, but Iain was definitely our overhead eyes to help us around the course. And I think he did a very good job to fill us with confidence that he knew what was going on, even if we didn't know what was going on.
Wow, that is a big deal for them to pull that at the last minute. And you didn't see that coming. Oh. Wow. Okay. So our questions here from Nicholas Hogg. Your amazing first 9 races resulted in 4 firsts, 2 seconds, 1 third, 4th and a 5th. What happened with the 8th in race 10?
Yeah, so going into the final race, we knew that the only team that could potentially mathematically win would be the Spanish if they won the final race. So that was a choice from that start that we would start tight to leeward of that Spanish team to try to limit their abilities off the starting line. We knew that they're quite fast downwind, so we had to kind of really make sure we did a good job on the first half of that first little bit to slow them down and keep them back in the pack to try to avoid them getting to the front ultimately. It was probably one of the hardest races that Matt and I sailed, to be honest, because it just wasn't the style that we wanted to approach those races. We love just pushing ourselves to be at the front, and we had probably almost our best start of the event was that race. And instead of being able to like really capitalize upon it, but potentially risk a bit to try and get to the front again, we had to keep pretty good tabs on that Spanish team. And I think we might have done something like 20 or 25 tacks up that first upwind rather than trying to minimize it, because as we all know, you lose a little bit every time you do a corner. So 8th was probably almost better than what it could have been. So we're happy to put that one behind us, and I think that certainly inspired us for the next day, that's for sure.
And that's what I'd like to lead into. Talk us through the medal race. What were you thinking in the lead up to it? What was your pre-race strategy? Was it always going to be that port hand start?
I think it's a funny one, but probably it was. I can remember watching the 2008
talking about it the night
medal
before.
race.
What was the strategy?
It was pretty much decided the night before.
Yeah, we all talked about the port start that they'd done in some of the previous races in 08 when they had a good lead. And for Matt and I, we just wanted to make sure we didn't get any letters, and that was to make sure there's a number of measurement criteria that you must go through just prior to the race, and you've got to be there in certain time slots. So we got to the club very, very early to make sure we didn't pick up any penalty points for that. And the only real risk for us beyond that was to be over at the start line. So the safest option was to be definitely really behind everyone. So we guaranteed that we were definitely really behind everyone. And then after that, Matt and I made the agreement that, if we do that bit, then we can really push it hard and try and sail as well as you could for the rest of the race. So rather than having that little bit of doubt that if we'd been in the mix on starboard and been over, then that would have been pretty terrible, that's for sure.
Well, that's right. You basically broke all the rules, didn't you? Starting behind everybody and then getting out away to the right and then come back and, you're in second.
Well, the right was good.
Yeah. No, it was great to see. And so then what could you do to celebrate if you're in your bubble?
Yeah, well, watching back the playback of celebrations, I feel like we may have undersold it. The Spanish guys did a much better job. You would have thought that they'd won the Olympics. So we've got a bit to work on for next time. But no, it was really nice. When we sailed back into the shore, I'm sure everyone's seen the images, but Jake Lilly was very kindly offered me a hug into the water. And then the team carried us and the boat out of the water, which, that was totally surreal. I think it's something I'd never expected, and was really, really cool, actually. So, and we were met there by the whole team. My sister Jamie, I think, was the first one to give me a proper hug, so that was nice. And she had all the phones with Zoom calls to all the family and friends and people in Europe and Australia. So it was really, really nice. And we had a great team dinner all together after that, it was nice.
It was impressive to see the lift out of the water, because I kind of added your weight, Matt's weight, the 470 weight. I went, oof, It was a great effort.
Probably a little easy with the laser.
Definitely.
I think
But
so.
we did a good job to make sure they weren't as extravagant as the rugby sevens and the cricket team. So we stayed out of trouble. So
Sounds good. And so then, yeah, moving on, the future.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. To be honest, I probably almost feel more lost now after this campaign than I did the last one. I know you've sent me a really nice email, Karen, just touching on it, because I think it's a common theme between all Olympians and probably the coaches and support staff that go with it, because it is a 4, or in this case, a 5-year journey or more. And you put so much into it that suddenly you don't have that little bit of that light at the end of the tunnel that you know you're focusing towards, and you've got to find those new goals. So for me, I don't know what it might be for now. It might just be a little triathlon race or something fun, but I've just signed up to do the Moth Worlds next week. So that's definitely going to bring my confidence levels way back down. So that'll be a good lesson for me. I'm prepared for plenty of swimming.
Have you done much foiling?
It's going to be a challenge.
Have you done much foiling, Will?
I've done some foiling sailing, but not a lot in the Moth. So
Okay.
certainly in the deep end, and to be in a borrowed boat, it's going to be challenging. But I've never sailed in Lake Garda, so I always have felt like a bit of a fake over here in Europe. So this will be finally the moment to do that and to tick off that box. So that'll be really cool.
Are you going to be racing against your partner?
No, do you mean Matt Belcher? He's
No, not Matt.
Just passed through quarantine and safely back in Australia.
No, not Matt. Your Swiss partner.
My girlfriend Nelly, no, she's volunteered to be support crew. She's going to go bat winging, which she's much more into, and it's a lot cheaper sport. So I think she's certainly a lot smarter than I am. So it'll be really nice.
And are you going to go around and do the Olympics again with the 470s or 49ers? Where do you think that's going to fit?
Paris is pretty challenging for someone in my position, I think, just given the changes in classes and the reduced time frame. For us, the Olympics is 3 years away, but the selection criteria for the Olympics is only 2 years away. So for me to pair up with a new team, unless Matt's volunteering to go through some uncomfortable procedures, then I'd have to travel back to Australia, which at the moment is really difficult. We then need to get back out of Australia to get the competition that we need as well, which is also challenging. So it's probably not something I can really answer right now. I think the fire inside of me to keep competing at a high level is certainly there. So I'm really open to any opportunities I think I can, and that the Olympic road is something that's pretty special, and it is a little bit addictive. So
sure.
I wouldn't say no. I'd be really keen to, and I think you're right. The 49er or a 470 mixed crew is probably my best chances. I'd always joked it would be the Finn because I was keen to put on a couple of kilograms, but yeah, unless they reintroduce the staff for the 2028 Olympics, maybe I'll have to do away with the keelboat idea.
Possibly not with your sisters, or doing the 470s again with one of them. And
I'd have to talk to mum and dad if they're willing to go through it all again. It must be pretty stressful for them to have the two people I know in the final lead up before we left Australia with Jamie and I at home, and mum and dad trying to give us the chance to see us, but also the fear of passing on COVID to us with families and friends and things like that. I think the stress is they might need a little bit of time to calm down from that one. But no, I've got 3 sisters, so if there's a good chance even if one of them's angry at me, maybe I can convince the other one to come for a little sail. We'll see what happens.
Good one, Will. Ian, where do you see the future of the Olympics end? It's a 3-year turnaround, so it's shorter than normal. We've got these couple of class changes, so just take us through. The laser's still set, but you know we'll touch on the 470's gone to the mixed, so, and we're bringing in the kiteboarding. So maybe you can touch on that for a bit.
Yeah, look, it's a compressed program. So, you know, Australian Sailing's been working on it for some time. There's been a big squad, particularly in the skiffs. But, you know, there's a lot of work to do. The lasers, you know, Matt Wern's continuing. And there's a really strong laser squad. So, you know, we're very fortunate to have such a strong squad of lasers in this country, and that will continue. But, you know, to bring in the skills of, say, a NACRA or you know, and even the 49ers and these development fast boat classes. There's a lot of work to do. Obviously, we didn't perform as well as I think anyone would like, and in a short period of time. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see where the 470 mix. Obviously, you know, we've got a lot of IP in that class, and we know how to make the boats go fast, but that's just one part of it. You have to race them clinically, as Matt and Will did, and have that ultimate consistency to be just there all the time. And so, you know, is Matt going to sail? Is Will going to sail? I think the dust needs to settle a little bit. They won't be sailing together, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it is. You know, it was great to see people like Mara Stransky, you know, get a first and a third in the last day of the laser radials, and her to break through with her sort of, you know, her hard work into giving her some confidence to launch off. And there's a really good young laser radial squad that have been supporting her, and they're a very good group like the men. So when it comes to boards and kites, you know, this is really a new area for us. You know, maybe Will's going to be on a kite or a board. Use that tactical nous to.
Well, falling is the start of their career.
But look, it's a new area, and it's really a pathway within Australian sailing right now. And certainly on a world circuit, we don't have races, but 40% of the medals are in these classes. And, you know, you would think Australia, sun, sand, wind, you know, we should be good in these classes, but we haven't developed these classes into racing yet. So it's a bit early to tell. And you know, I know there's a big effort going in through the pathway, and we'll have to wait and see.
Good one. Karen, how are we going with we got any other questions from any of the members out there?
Yeah, we do actually. The technique sailing upwind, Will, you know, what is it?
Yeah, so the 470 class and the fin class at the Olympics are both open pumping rules with a certain flag that's displayed above a wind limit. So for the fins, it's 12 knots and they get to pump openly downwind. And then for the 470s, it's from 8 knots up and we can pump upwind and downwind. So it's a technique a little bit like the windsurfers use, which is to pump the mast and the sail, and you're fluttering the leech of the sail to power the boat to go forwards. I know sometimes it probably looks silly from the outside, but like as the sailors on board, it's a rule that's really changed the class. It's made it way more physically cool, I guess. It would be my personal perspective of it, because it's something that I've really embraced, and it's actually why I really like sailing the boats. Like I look to the Ironman and the Tour de France riders as my inspiration now of how fit I want to try and be to sail the 470 well. And that combined with all the other sailing skills, it makes a pretty full program for us. So going
just to put that into
Tokyo,
context, you know, that pumping broke Will's hand.
Ooh.
Yeah, so the 2019 we had 3 events in a row in Japan actually, and without realizing it, because of all the pumping, I actually have fractured my scapula in my arm. But needless to worry, Victor had me back sailing the boat only 3 weeks later with my cast intact. So I had a bit of grip tape strapped to the front of it, so I was good to go. But yeah, it does look a little bit silly, but the moding of the boats is hugely powerful. Whether you're going high and slow or low and fast, upwind and downwind, like those kind of moding changes, and that's what the pumping really helps you to facilitate in the boat. So upwind, it might only increase the boat speed by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 of a knot at times, but in other moments, it could be up to 1.5 knots if you could catch a wave and really progress forward. So, and then downwind, the gains were huge. There's like 3 to 4 knots of boat speed to be gained at times. And yeah, we've set more speed records in the 470 in the last year than we have in a really long time. So, yeah, I guess from my side, I kind of hope that an element of it is kept in that mixed. Maybe they have to make the rule a little bit higher wind strength to equalize a little bit to facilitate a preference between men and women crews or men and women helms in the 470, but Matt adds just as much to the kinetics in the boat as what I do, even though I'm maybe a little bit more visible from outside of the boat. But yeah, it's really changed the equipment that we've used in the boat over the years, made everything have to be a little bit stronger, made us certainly feel more like athletes. The shape of speed isn't round. Like, you don't just drink beers and go out and be Olympic sailors these days. You got to work hard in the gym, and I think that's where the appeal for certainly for me was. And yeah, I really hope that elements of the pumping are kept going forwards.
Okay.
And to both, sorry, Karen, sorry, I've got a question here from someone. To both of you, because you've both been at the Olympics, we've got a lot of youth on the call tonight on the web. So is there something you'd like to pass on to the future Olympians out there? And is there a top tip that we can, leave them with in particular? Go, Will, and then Ian, please.
Yeah, I guess if I reflect back on my career, and it's probably what I've always said, and why I'm so happy that my sisters got to follow me into this Olympic kind of campaign, is I think an Olympic campaign, whether you get that final result of what you've been chasing or not, you learn so much about yourself. You learn to become a lot more rounded. It challenges you in ways that you would never have expected. And then the skills that it teaches you to carry forward into whatever the next transition in your life will be. Like, I have no doubt for me that I have new skills that I wouldn't have been able to get at university. And that's because of my Olympic campaign. And yeah, I think if you get the chance, whether it's just for a day or for 5 years or for 22 years, like Matt did, to jump on a bit of an Olympic campaign and just to see what it's all about, it is really valuable. And yeah, I guess from my little side, if you're lucky enough and you do get what you want, then you do end up with one of these, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's the one. Good on you, Will. Very proud of you. Ian, any comments from you about the future and what we can be talking to recommending to the youth and inspiring them?
Well, look, sailing's a wonderful sport because, you can be as young as, the kids in the nippers and stuff and develop into gold medalists like Will, or you could be, an older generation sailing etchels like us, or we could be like Wingnut, sailing a dragon. So sailing has a wonderful sport that is a lifelong journey. And I think, if you're keen on your sport and you're interested in the Olympic program, offers a really unique opportunity to go to the University of Sailing and develop that skill. And as Will said, it's not just sailing skills; these are life skills. And to put it into perspective of what an Olympic campaign is, it's excellence in every part of your life, and whether it be communications, attention to detail, time planning, understanding, a very complex sport of hydrodynamics, aerodynamics, combining it all together with a game of chess. We live in a very complex sport, and to take it to the level of gold medal is it's intense. And I think to test yourself with that intensity is something that, if you want to be successful in your life, you're going to have to do that. And the skills learned in sailing is a sport, but it's going to lay it out for the rest of your life. These guys can go and do anything now.
No, you're exactly right. We've touched on that before between us, that we're very fortunate that, you can sail from an Optus at the age of 8 and always keep sailing, as you say, to Gordon Ingate at his age. And I love the expression, University of Sailing. Karen, is there any other quick questions we got there? Otherwise, we probably should wrap it up. We've gone over 7 o'clock, and we really do appreciate Will over in Switzerland.
There is one that Michael from obviously a Riverview boy would like to know if you're going to come back and do some coaching and join Sean Connor and Finn Alexander. We've got to get you back in the country first, right, Will?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I think I was just going to take the opportunity and just to thank the club and all the members, like the amount of support we received, text messages and everything before the Olympics as well as after. I think just showcases the family of the journey that gets you there in an Olympic campaign. And the Riverview sailing program was part of my journey through my last years of high school. And for sure, I'd love to go back and no doubt they'll teach me a few things and how to sail a pacer and pace it well.
Ah, so that's where you got your skills, up the river. Great.
Pacer.
Okay.
That
well,
was the
thanks.
last time I hiked with Karen, and so next week would be the first time 14 years later.
Okay, so Will, all the best next week with the Moth Worlds. Hope you go well there and foiling, and all the best there without having had too much practice, should we say. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Will, congratulations again. You've made us proud, the whole of Australia, and certainly the squadron was, some big efforts, and we really do appreciate it. Iain, congratulations to yourself too. Great career there with, finished with the Tokyo Olympics and the managing you did with the team there. Just inspirational from both of you. Karen, thanks for putting on tonight. Yeah. Gents, we'll leave it there, but to everybody out there, thank you. And on behalf of the squadron, congratulations and all the best over in Europe, Will, and Iain, good luck in quarantine. We'll see you out there very quickly. Thanks all, and thanks, Karen. Cheers.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks, guys.